I am Barbara Grabowski, Vice President and Program Director for the League of Women Voters of Greater Pittsburgh. Welcome all of you to our program this evening, Pennsylvania Judicial Elections, What You Need to Know, which is brought to you jointly by the League of Women Voters of Greater Pittsburgh and Pennsylvanians for Modern Courts. The League of Women Voters of Greater Pittsburgh is a nonpartisan political organization that neither supports nor opposes any candidate or political party, with more than 200 members based here in Pittsburgh. We provide citizens in our region with information about your right to vote, how elections work, how local, state, and federal government is organized, how you can participate in that government. And we work hard to see that every vote counts through programs like this, civic education in schools, voter registration and candidate forums. We publish an annual guide to local government officials. And for more information about what we do, registering to vote, finding your polling place, figuring out who is running for office, and candidate forums and upcoming programs, be sure to check out our website at lwvpgh.org. We will put that in the chat. And I now would like to introduce Deborah Gross, President and CEO of Pennsylvanians for Modern Courts. The League has collaborated with Pennsylvanians for Modern Courts on many programs, and we're delighted to be working with them this evening on this important topic. Deborah will describe this evening's program and introduce our speakers.
Well, thank you, Barbara, and thank you, the League. As Barbara mentioned, we really enjoy our partnership with the League, and it warms my heart to see so many people on this program when the weather outside is nice. So thank you for coming. And I am joined here tonight. I'm Deborah Gross. I'm the CEO of Pennsylvanians for Modern Courts. Our website is www.pmconline.org. And I wanted to tell everybody that there will be any questions that you have, put them in the chat and we will try to get to them. And I am joined tonight by Judge Maureen Lally-Green. Judge Maureen Lally-Green was a Superior Court judge. She was the 4th female Superior Court judge, and was the president of Duquesne Law School, or is that the correct title, Your Honor?
Dean.
Dean, sorry. Okay, Dean. It's so hard to know what each law school has. So sorry about that. And is currently still active, I'll say, in certain judicial matters. So she and I are both going to give a little disclaimer as we begin this. I want everybody to know that I'm on the Minor Judiciary Education Board appointed by the Supreme Court, which oversees the education of the minor judiciary. So that's the magisterial district court judges and municipal certain municipal judges in Philadelphia. So I am not espousing any viewpoints of the MJEB. The viewpoints I espouse are from my years of experience, honestly, as a litigator, as well as my, being a CEO of Pennsylvanians for Modern Courts. And Your Honor, do you want to give your
Sure.
disclaimer?
Sure, and welcome everyone. I'm Maureen Lally-Green, and I, just as a context, I served on the Superior Court from 1998 to 2009. So it's been many years since that, but I've remained rather active in serving the courts, particularly the Supreme Court, on various committees throughout the time since I departed from the bench and while I was on the bench. Presently, I was just very recently appointed to the Judicial Ethics Advisory Board. And I am probably, I'm among the newest members of that board, and it has been an April 1st appointment, so this is very new. And
is it real then? If it's April 1st, it could have been a fool's joke.
I know it could have been, but it wasn't.
Sorry.
And it is, I have been actually, so my disclaimer is, while I'm a member of that board, I am not speaking for the board at all. I'm not speaking for any of the advice the board has given. This is just my experience being a judge. I was both an appointed judge and an elected judge. And also at least what the Code of Judicial Conduct says. Now, the board also covers magistrate district judges, MDJ, we call them MDJ judges, which is the board that Deborah sits on for the educational purposes. So we'll try our best to field some of the questions that come along, but the purpose of tonight is to give an overview and a perspective on some of the issues that have been identified as relevant to getting elected and serving as a judge.
So with that, I'm going to share my screen and we can start. So let's hope it works. Okay. Okay, and let's see from the beginning. Do we see a slideshow? Resume slideshow. There we are. Okay.
Yep.
So again, thank you everybody for joining us. You know, as we said, this is to discuss judicial elections. I want to emphasize right off the bat, judicial elections are important. Okay, we're going to explain why, but you know, odd number years do not have the best turnout. Figures are that 20% of voters who are registered turn out for odd numbered years. So this is why these programs and, you know, other programs that we'll have, we're going to PMC will have a appellate court judicial candidate forum on May 9th, you know, are very important because you need to educate yourself about the candidates. Just a little bit quickly about PMC. You know, we are a nonprofit 501c3 nonpartisan organization. Our goal is to educate voters about the judiciary. We educate high school students about the judiciary and the law. You know, we want you to be comfortable in the courtroom and be able to access justice. We also advocate for judicial reforms, but tonight we're here to educate you about the importance of the judiciary. If you would, we would greatly appreciate it for a moment if you would scan the QR code, because it will, we need this to keep track of who comes to the programs in order to receive funding. So, you know, and we'll show this again at the end, but thank you. Also, the PowerPoint that I'm showing, we will send out to everybody who attends so that, you know, you can feel free to share it. It is important that information is spread. Okay. So I did that, but these are some of our programs that PMC has. They are available on our website. We invite you to join them in Pittsburgh. We will actually be in Pittsburgh and have a few programs in person in May. And our events are also listed on our website at pmconline.org. Okay, so this is our spring benefit, actually, and I wanted to make a plug. We are honoring Judge Smith Ribner, who is the first African-American judge on the Commonwealth Court, which you will learn about. And she has really she was really a leader in enacting and supporting and talking about reforms of the court. We also have a keynote speaker, Lauren Rickling, who has just edited a book about judges and female judges across the state, federal, and state and federal courts. Okay, but okay, why am I not turning page? There we go. Tonight, our agenda is the structure of our Pennsylvania court system. We're going to go through that quickly, so hopefully I won't talk too fast, but you need to know why it's important to elect judges. We will then talk about election of judges, and then we're also going to talk a little bit about the limitations on judges when they're campaigning, because judges are not, judicial elections are not like political campaigns. There are a number of restrictions on judges that we want you to understand as well. So quickly, a structure of our court system. Pennsylvania is actually, so you know, one of the oldest, right? We have the oldest constitution in the US, and our, at the Allegheny County Courthouse was built in 1794. So our court system goes back to the founding of our country. And I'm going to skip the slide, but this is the main structure of our court system. You'll see these triangles all over the place. We have entry-level courts at the bottom right. That's our magisterial district court. Also, an entry-level court is a court of common pleas, and then the top part of the triangle are our appellate courts. And we'll discuss a little bit about what they each do, because it's, again, can't emphasize enough that you need to know what the court is, what it does, how it impacts your life, and why you need to go vote for a judge. In Pittsburgh, we have magisterial district courts. There are currently in Allegheny County 10 vacancies in the magisterial district courts and 5 vacancies in the court of common pleas. It is really important for you to understand where the vacancies are, right? Magisterial district court vacancies are in your geographic area. You're not voting for the entire Allegheny County or entire Pittsburgh County. Then the minor judiciary and the magisterial district courts handle civil actions less than $12,000, landlord-tenant disputes. They handle certain criminal cases, but they do handle all preliminary arraignments, non-traffic offenses, non-traffic summary offenses, and traffic offenses. They are what's known as, how do I say it, not a court of record, so that they don't record proceedings. If you're in an MDJ court, a magisterial district court, and you want a recording, you need to make a request, so you know. And there are no jury trials. You are in front of a magisterial district judge. Those are our, and we like to say, and I'll quickly say this, that those are the people's courts. It's interesting because to be a magisterial district judge, you don't necessarily have to be a lawyer. You take a class. It is a 1-month class if you're not a lawyer, and you must pass an exam. And then the magisterial district judges on a yearly basis have a continuing education requirement of 40 hours. But it is frequented, I'll say, or most cases that are before a magisterial district judge are individuals without representation, or pro se litigants, or self-represented litigants, however you would like to call it. After a case enters the magisterial district court, if there's a decision by a judge that maybe you're not happy with, it could be appealed to the court of common pleas, which is also an entry-level court for matters above $12,000. And sometimes it's more, some people, there are a number of court of common pleas judge positions available. Actually, in Allegheny County, there's only 1 vacancy. If for those of you who are on, in case you're in Philadelphia, there's 10 vacancies. So across the state, there are different number of vacancies in courts of common pleas. Again, the court of common pleas, I'd like to say, varies by county, right? We have different counties have different courts of common pleas in terms of judges being specialists. So in Allegheny County, you have we have judges who have become specialists and are focused on civil, who are focused on criminal, who are focused on family, who are focused on orphans court. Those are various divisions within our courts of common pleas in Allegheny County. We have similar specialization in Philadelphia, but in the other counties, judges handle all these. The courts of common pleas judges frequently handle are generalists. They handle civil matters, criminal matters, orphans court matters, family law matters. Your Honor, do you have anything to say? I know I'm going through this quickly.
on this, first of all, I agree with what you just said about the different systems, the different judicial districts having different ways of managing things, usually as a function of the population and the size of the court dockets. Sometimes it is organized that way, and sometimes it defaults to that way, where some judges just are more have a caseload that is more criminal than not, for example. Sometimes that's a function of the judge's experience too. But I wanted to identify also this concept of judicial district. We in Allegheny County are in the judicial district. Now you might think, well, every county is a judicial district. Well, that's not so true. There are 62 judicial districts in Pennsylvania, but 67 counties. And that accommodates, you might think, well, the numbers, there's five differences. What happens? So the low population areas come together as one judicial district and share judges, or in one case, 3 local, very low population counties come together and share 2 judges. So that's why you have the difference in judicial districts. I live in Butler County, and so I've got a different judicial district than Allegheny. And sometimes people think all the judges have to come from Pittsburgh to be on the Allegheny County Court of Common Pleas. That is not the case. I think Deborah just referred to that a little bit earlier. It can come from any part of the county. You can be, as long as you're a lawyer, you can run for office and try to get elected. The reality, however, is you have to go through quite a few hoops to get elected in Allegheny County, because there are different groups of people that are interested in knowing what your credentials are. And we'll get to that, but I just tee it up for you, Deb.
Okay, thank you very much. And so, you know, just as a picture, so everybody knows, in Allegheny County, the president judge is Kim Berkeley Clark. And as I noted, you know, the Allegheny County 5th Judicial District is divided into 4 different divisions. So these are the 4 different divisions, and each of these divisions is headed by an administrative judge. And it's also based on the size. I mean, as we know, Allegheny County is growing in population, and so the court too is growing to adjust to that. So those are, I'd like to say, our entry-level courts, but it's a little misleading because we also have this other court that is an intermediate appellate court as well as an entry-level court. We like to confuse things in Pennsylvania. We don't like to make anything simple. So we have 2 intermediate appellate courts are known as. One is the Superior Court and one is the Commonwealth Court. But also our Commonwealth Court is an entry-level court. So currently, right, to explain our Commonwealth Court, it handles matters that are brought by municipalities, brought by townships, brought by county governments, or brought against them. It is unique to Pennsylvania. There is no other state. I think there may be one other state now, after I say that, in the country that has a Commonwealth Court, and it has original jurisdiction. For example, with respect to nominations, ballots, issues, they can originate in Commonwealth Court. I give an aside that we'll talk about the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has some unique powers and unique situations. It also has an original jurisdiction. And there was a matter that we can discuss that was brought before the Supreme Court through a King's Bench petition. It's known that the court said, go back and start in the Commonwealth Court. So, you know, and this is our current Commonwealth Court makeup. Judge Renee Cohn-Jubilier is the president judge. And I just want to highlight the fact that she recently issued an 800-page decision with respect to the funding of education in our Commonwealth. And after reviewing weeks of testimony, came to the conclusion that we are not providing or living up to our constitutional obligations in Pennsylvania with respect to education in Pennsylvania. Your Honor, do you want to add anything?
Surely. A Commonwealth Court, I sat on Superior Court, so I'll talk about that in a minute. But Commonwealth Court in the original jurisdiction, as Deb was saying, has jurisdiction over statewide elections. And so as every odd year, they assign that they are all on hold around the election time period, because everything is done in an emergency fashion. And it's actually wonderful to see how they do what they do and how quickly they come out with their determinations. But the Commonwealth Court is, as the name says, it is the place where all of the the different agencies that have hearings within the agency structure, whether they're called hearing officers or judges, the right of appeal goes to the Commonwealth Court. So it is the statutory court, and it is very much receiving, so it's very sensitive to administrative law. In some instances, however, like with the zoning hearing boards of local townships and whatever, the appeal goes to Common Pleas Court, and then it bumps up to Commonwealth Court. So you kind of think of when there's an agency that's involved, or a board, often the case lands in Commonwealth Court by statute. The Superior Court, I don't know if you're ready to go to that. Is there separate? Yeah, the Superior Court, we used to call the Superior Court, thank you, the People's Appellate Court, because it is just that. Everything that involves the person pretty much comes up to Superior Court. So all criminal cases go to Superior Court, civil cases, family law cases, orphans court, which is really wills, trusts, estates, adoptions, all of that. All of it goes into the Superior Court, which is purely an appellate court. But we also get a lot of constitutional law questions. Not everyone, but a lot. And so you just, whereas the Commonwealth Court was 9 members statutorily, the Superior Court, because of the workload, is 15 members of the Superior Court. And then there are 2 or 3 senior judges. I think there's just 2 now, senior judges that help out the court in the work of the court. But it is the same term as the Commonwealth Court, but a very different caseload than Commonwealth Court.
And I just want to say that when Judge Maureen Lally-Green says different caseload, our Superior Court has typically anywhere in 2011, for example, 7,800 filings versus the past couple of years, 6,000, versus the Supreme Court, which is, significantly less, like 1,500. So it is one of the busiest courts in the nation. It writes a tremendous amount of decisions. It's not a trial court, right? It's a court of appeal. So the trials can occur, in Commonwealth Court, in Court of Common Pleas, in municipal court without a jury. But it is an exceedingly busy court. I've given some examples of cases that recently were decided by our Superior Court, so you understand that. And and again, there are 2 positions open on this court, so we wanted to make sure that you understand that the busy nature of this court and the amount of work that has to be done.
Yeah. When I was on the bench back when, we would sometimes have to author in the hundreds of opinions in a year. So you will, it is, one has to be really committed to the law to want to run for Superior Court, because you are working constantly. You have to keep yourself up on a whole bunch of law too, but it is delightful. The people in the appellate courts, I know them a little better than I know the Common Pleas Court, but they're really, really collaborative, and support each other so much in getting the work done and getting it right.
And so our court, I'll say, of last resort, right, is our Pennsylvania Supreme Court. All right. And it has 7 positions. Currently, there are only 6. Our last year, Chief Justice Max Baer passed away, and that seat is available. Is why we're having a Supreme Court candidate, primary. But it's the ultimate authority on matters of the Constitution. It has discretionary authority. So what that means is, for example, in the Superior Court, they have to look at every case that is appealed to them. Supreme Court doesn't have to do that. They can decide which petitions and which issues they want to address. And typically they are addressing issues that are, first time interpretation of the Constitution or significantly impactful on our citizens. Your Honor, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, it is unique, I think, in the nation. Back in 1968, there was an amendment to the Constitution of Pennsylvania. And in it, it was made clear that the Supreme Court had responsibility, of course, for decision making. And as Deb said, that has a discretionary aspect to it. But the other thing is responsibility for the entire legal system. And that involves discipline of lawyers. It involves the lawyers themselves becoming approved for practice of law. Thank you. It involves all the administration of the courts. In many states, the administration of the court is with the legislature. And even with the United States Supreme Court, the administrative side of the US Supreme Court is with Congress. So it's a real different dynamic in Pennsylvania, and it is a lot of work. So think of it as two branches: judicial decision-making and administrative. And I say administrative very loosely because a lot of the work they do is really significant to the practice of law, for sure. And then go ahead.
No, I just wanted to also emphasize, like when we talk about the practice of law, and also they oversee and help decide the rules of being a lawyer and an application, right? So the rules of evidence, the rules of criminal procedure, the rules of civil procedure, rules of informa pauperis right now are being considered. Okay, that means that if somebody can't afford to file something, you know, the court will waive those fees and costs. So those are very important in terms of access to justice.
Correct. And what is noted here is our special committee, and those are many of the topics that Debbie just talked about. I will also say that at times there are special committees that are just set up like what we would in other parts of our life called ad hoc committees to look at things. Way back when Justice Cappy was the Chief Justice, he set up, for example, a committee on race, gender, and ethnic fairness for the whole system in Pennsylvania, and it eventually became a body that the court retained over the span, of 25 years now. So one can see that it's a very awesome power that the court has, but done in a way, it's always, at least in my experience, been done in a way that is respectful of that power and authority, always trying to instill confidence in the system that what the justices are doing is done in a transparent way and for the right reasons. So yes, very, very important powers that our Supreme Court has. And the Supreme Court does an awful lot in the area of equal access to justice. I'm just looking at the bottom line on the side here. How do I want to put it? Very committed to that. And also committed, and this is a work in progress, to modernization of some of our court systems called computers and electronic filing and all this. You know, there are still some systems that are pretty ancient in our judicial system, but it's the way it is. And but our court is really just committed to doing, as I said, the right thing.
So I will put in a plug that the court is funded by the legislature. Okay,
right.
So for everybody who thinks that the court gets its money from maybe filings, it is funded from the legislature. So it can only make as much modernization based on the monies that it receives, right? So I will tell you that in the past, there have been challenges to the budget for the court based on certain legislative threats. So, you know, it's important that the court not be constrained by budgetary issues. And for example, you know, the budget that Governor Shapiro just presented does propose a budget that the Administrative Office of Pennsylvania Courts has proposed. So that's very important. The other thing I wanted to emphasize here, since we've been all hearing, and we'll get to this about news about the Supreme Court, is that we have a judicial conduct board that oversees judges' conduct. We have a code of conduct for the judges. There are canons that they have to, abide by. We will discuss that, but you should have confidence in your judiciary that they are following the law, interpreting the law, and understand that they are accountable to the law.
Right.
Okay. So I say that because, this is our just a picture of our state building, but I want to briefly just touch upon quickly the federal court system, which is very different from our Pennsylvania court system. Remember, federal court is there's a difference in the matters. It has to involve federal law, or there has to be a diversity, and the case has to be more than $75,000. There's a difference in how the judges are selected / appointed / elected. In federal court, judges are appointed. They are appointed for life. As you will hear, we elect our judges in Pennsylvania. They are for 10-year terms. Then there's this thing called retention elections. Retention election says, okay, I've been a judge for 10 years. Should I be retained? Yes or no? We actually have some retention elections that will be on our November ballot, not on our primary ballot. But these are important differences between the federal system and the state system. Your Honor, do you want to say anything to that?
Sure. There isn't, and you might think, that I'm looking at this last point, for an appeal to be heard by from the PA Supreme Court by the U.S. Supreme Court, it must involve an issue of federal law. Well, you were thinking, does the litigant have to go through the federal system to get up to the Supreme Court? And the answer is no. It goes from the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania directly to the Supreme Court of the United States. That's how that would go. But there is in our Third Circuit a way for the Third Circuit, when the Third Circuit is looking at an issue involving Pennsylvania law, to get to ask the Pennsylvania Supreme Court for guidance on certain issues that maybe the appellate court in the federal system is dealing with. So the bottom line here is sometimes our courts are dealing with issues that really involve also the wisdom of the other side, with federal, state, or state and federal. And there are processes to have questions considered. Not that sometimes that will work out, that it will be because it's a contested item, but sometimes it isn't a contested item. And the court will weigh in on that. So there is that with the Third Circuit and the PA Supreme Court.
And so I also just want to mention that the courthouse is open, right? Courthouses are open. You are more than welcome to go into a courthouse to observe a proceeding. If you find that the courthouse is closed, it could be because there is a sensitive matter, there is a confidential matter, but in our country, courthouses are open and accessible to the public. And this is just a quick map. Pennsylvania, since Judge Lally-Green referenced the Third Circuit, Pennsylvania is one of five states or five areas, I'll say, that are included in the Third Circuit. So the Third Circuit's jurisdiction is a little broader than, for example, the Western District of Pennsylvania, which encompasses Allegheny County and sort of the western part of the state.
Right.
Okay. But
so could I just comment on that if you just flip back a little bit?
Yeah.
It's a population, basically kind of more or less a population related thing that circuit to circuit. So some circuits have more states in it than others do. And we have Delaware, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and then the Virgin Islands. And I have a few friends who were on the federal district court, and they always wanted to go to the Virgin Islands in certain times of the year. And I would always tell them about that, but it was just the way the court system worked down there. But the point of it is, if you notice, our middle district is huge, even in in the trial level. So the picture we're seeing here on the left is the trial, the federal district court. And then what when you talk about the Court of Appeals, that is what includes the Third Circuit and those the 3 states and the Virgin Islands.
Right. So, as we mentioned, right, the federal judges are appointed, they're appointed for life, and we've all now become familiar with this process because of the availability of television. There's no age limits in Pennsylvania, for example, judges age out. There's a 75-year-old age limit. So, there are important differences between the state and federal court judges. So, let's talk about election of judges in odd numbered years, right? People sometimes say off years. I never like to say that. Actually, today I was with somebody who said it's an opportunity year. So I agree with that. This is an important opportunity for you to express your right to vote in our democracy. And, again, our triangle here. So the, Court of Common Pleas, Intermediate Appellate Courts, Pennsylvania Supreme Courts are for 10-year terms. The Municipal Court and the Magisterial District Courts are for 6-year terms. These are the requirements to be a judge in the Court of Common Pleas and above. Okay, and I emphasize that. You have to be a member of the Bar of Pennsylvania. You have to be live within the district, 1 year prior to the election. We'll discuss it, but frequently the bar associations review the candidates. They have a policy that they would like to see a candidate have about 10 years of experience. They don't want somebody who just comes out of law school, passes the bar to become a Court of Common Pleas or appellate court judge. Your Honor, do you have any comments on that?
Well, I'm hailing back to something I spoke about earlier. You might think you want to be a judge right away when you leave law school, but there are things like bar associations, judicial review committees, and then other groups interested in judicial quality really do weigh in on the qualifications of various people. But for the common pleas, it's usually the local county bar association that will weigh in on whether a candidate is highly qualified or highly recommended, not recommended, or not recommended at this time. Those are typically the 4 analyses, and there are a number of things. As Deb was saying, experience. It's also the kind of cases you had, trial work versus other kinds of things. It's your reputation. It is your service to the community. That is also looked at to see how committed you are to serving, because being a judge is really a service position. You are serving the people in your locale. And sometimes that means you have to go way above and beyond what you thought you would, meaning you're there late at night, you're writing the opinions on weekends, or you're reading briefs at all times of the day and night. So very much there is a review process. Now statewide, and we haven't gotten to that, but it's a little different for statewide.
But it's important. I mean, I would like, let's talk about it. So,
Okay.
Allegheny County Bar Association does an investigation of the Court of Common Pleas judges, as well as the appellate court judges that are based in Allegheny County. Right. Philadelphia Bar Association does an analysis for the Philadelphia Court of Common Pleas judges, the Philadelphia Municipal Court judges, as well as the appellate court candidates that are based in Philadelphia. The Pennsylvania Bar Association, and I'm saying all this, we will show you the websites, and I will make sure that you all have this information. And it's also on PMC's website, and it's on the League of Women Voters website as well. The Pennsylvania Bar Association reviews all the appellate court candidates. Now, you can't force a candidate, right, to submit to a review. So there are candidates who, for whatever reason, do choose not to submit to the Bar Association's review. They are not recommended by that Bar Association, and they typically make a notation that says, you know, didn't submit to further review. I want to give you an example of how thorough this review process is, because I think it's really important for you to understand that this is an independent group of individuals. You know, it's comprised of lawyers and non-lawyers. I'm going to speak to Philadelphia because I know that very well, since I sat on that commission, and I also sit on an investigative team for that commission. But the Judicial Commission is comprised of over 30 individuals. We do not ask their party affiliation. What the Bar Association is concerned is with their involvement in area of law. So we have the president judge of the Court of Common Pleas. We have the president judge of the municipal court. We have a district attorney. We have a public defender. We have the U.S. attorney. We have the U.S. public defender. We have, you know, sections, areas of specialty, I'll say. So we have a family law representative. We have a plaintiff's lawyer. We have a defense lawyer. You know, we have a public interest lawyer. It is really important to have this wide range of views sitting on the commission to look at, to consider the candidates. And how the process begins is there's a questionnaire. The questionnaires are actually available, the blank questionnaires are available on the various Bar Association websites, and the candidates fill them out. Then there's an investigative team put together to investigate that candidate. There are, in the Philadelphia Bar Association, we have 5 members of the investigative team. One has to be a non-lawyer. We have to get 20 references that are not recommended by the candidate. So we typically go, you know, we look for cases that the candidate was involved with. We go to the opposing party, we go to co-counsel, we go to the judge, we go to the community involvement that the candidate is, so that there is honestly a plethora of resources that the investigative team reaches out to, out of state, in state, you know, to investigate. They interview the candidate. There's a series of questions about their practice, their policies, their extracurricular activities, community involvement, and then the team comes together to make a recommendation. That team then goes and presents to the bigger Judicial Commission. The candidate also presents, and that bigger Judicial Commission itself comes up with its, you know, as Judge Lally-Green said, a recommendation, a highly recommended or not recommended. So this is not something that is taken lightly. So everyone knows it is not politically motivated. There is no politics involved. And it's a very serious and extensive process. Your Honor, do you want to add anything?
Yes. Different counties do it different ways.
Right.
Allegheny County, we elect, as part of the election process of the Bar Association, we elect a special group to serve on the Judicial Evaluation Committee. So these people usually are kind of what we would say the more senior people in the practice of, not all are senior, but senior and highly respected people get elected to this, generally speaking. But we don't, having gone through it a couple times, so this is a long time ago, but I will say that they are very careful. I still get questions on various candidates because I was a law professor for many years, and I knew these people as students and know them in their practice of law. So I do know that they are very thorough about what they do, and it is absolutely kept above the board on what they do. They try to be extremely fair, not any kind of ill will at all. It is just the analysis to see that we're getting a person that we can trust, that is ethical, and that will do the work, is capable of doing the work. So that's one thing. The Pennsylvania Bar also has a specific committee that only does this, and to be appointed to that committee is also one that requires you to be a very highly respected, regarded person in the statewide legal community. No judges are on that committee. This is just lawyers. But they have a similar process of having an evaluation committee that goes and they do a very thorough workup of you and really are probing for problems that you may have encountered or created for yourself over the years, because sometimes that is not known. But and when I say problems, I mean, like, do you have a criminal record or anything like that?
Or has there been a lawsuit filed against you, and why, right?
And why?
These are,
How was it resolved? Yeah, that kind of thing. Or have you been disciplined? You know, that's another thing. And a heavy questionnaire process here. So each area may have a bit of a different way of doing it, but all with the same goal. And the goal is to yield candidates that the public can basically have confidence in, that they'll do the right thing.
Right.
And these recommendations are for that purpose.
So there is a question that that says, do political parties take into account the ratings for common pleas judges they endorse? I honestly can't even answer that question because I would hope they do, but I would not know.
I don't know either. And I would say I wouldn't be surprised if the endorsements came out before the bar associations had done their work. So there's that too, you know, because sometimes the endorsement process occurs before the process runs its steam in the bar association. So I don't know.
I mean, there's also a comment that says, you know, last election, several common pleas judges were elected despite maybe not recommended by a bar association.
Mhm.
I can tell you that's a problem. You know, in Pennsylvania, that's also a problem because people don't educate themselves about who's being elected. They go and vote based on who's number one on the ballot, right? And everybody should know that how you get to be number one is literally by pulling your name out of a hat. It doesn't mean that you're number one, you know, a number one judge. So that's also not known. Sometimes it's as long as your placement on the ballot is very influential in how that candidate, the results for that candidate. So it's unfortunate. Also the sound of somebody's name. People don't do their homework. So that's why it is so important to research, to understand, you know, about the candidate. Your Honor, do you have anything to add?
Well, I will also say that many times the election of judges is viewed as a political party win / not win, non-win or loss. And if there is one place you do run, for those who maybe don't appreciate it, haven't lived through it like I have, you have to run at the common pleas level. You can be endorsed, or you can win both primaries. You can do that. I mean, if you get enough signatures to run on the Republican side and you're the Democratic Party, well, then you could actually throw your name in and you might win both. And if you win both, then you got a pretty good chance at the in November of winning, because you obviously won in the primary. In the appellate court system, you can only run on one party. So it becomes you know, a political, certainly it's politics. And my caution has always been with judges, make sure you know, regardless of which party the person is representing the candidate, make sure this is the person you want on the bench making decisions for you. And that takes education and knowing what each candidate brings to the table.
And so, you know, also the other important factor, I mean, it means that you need to do your homework, right? And we referenced the bar associations, but for example, for candidates who are running for an appellate court, who are a lower court judge or a lower appellate court judge, they have issued decisions, right? They have issued, or they're members of, you know, they've issued a decision maybe alone, or they've issued a decision as part of a majority or a minority, so that you can do your own research about those candidates.
Mm-hmm. One of your colleagues on this web presentation says, I was awakened to the fact that ballot placement is strategic and not the same on all ballots. And you might say, how does the ballot get put together? And that is a matter of the counties. They have different ways of putting together the ballot. So sometimes the ballot goes all just down one list. Sometimes it's broken up and right in the middle. You know, you go down maybe 15 and number 16 is up on the second half. It is a county thing. So,
but there, have confidence or faith. There is talk of having a ballot that will be constantly changing. So maybe modernizing our ballots, but right now it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah. But thank you for that comment, one of the listeners.
So, okay.
No, I was going to say we can move on.
Okay, so there is a difference as we mentioned in the beginning with respect to the election of magisterial district judges. Yes, they can absolutely, the candidates can absolutely be an attorney, but there's also the option, I will say, of them not being an attorney. They simply need to be 21 years of age, resident of the Commonwealth for a year in their district, and they need to take this class, the 4-week class, and pass the exam. And again, they will be continually required to take continuing judicial education classes.
Right. I will say they are the first, in many respects, the first place that citizens meet the legal system. And we have really some very fine MDJ judges out there who are very savvy, excellent at what they do. And they are, they're meeting people who are really either hurt by something that a citizen is doing to them or have been caught in some criminal activity. So it's not an easy job, and they often are on call. So that's another thing to think about when you're looking at your MDJ judges. They are on call. I will say another thing. There is a code of judicial conduct that applies to judges, all the way up the system. There's a separate code that applies to the magisterial district judges. And I will tell you, very, very, very similar. I've actually read a summary of the comparison between the two codes, but some recognition that the MDJ judges, for example, a difference would be that the MDJ judges can have work on the side. Whereas if you are elected as a judge all the way up to the Supreme Court, you have to devote full-time work to that judicial office. MDJ judges can have some work on the side, even practice of law on the side, as long as it doesn't interfere at all with the duties that the judge has.
Which actually is a great, I was going to say it's a great segue to the next spot, but
Sure.
The slide was a retention election. So let me come back to that because Your Honor, you gave us a great segue to the next spot, which deals with the laws and rules governing, judicial candidates and judges. And the first place that one looks for is our Pennsylvania Constitution. And so this mentions and emphasizes that judges who are lawyers, right, are other than MD, I guess judges other than MDJs can only be judges. They cannot engage in any other practice of law or any other office in a political party. Your Honor, do you want to add anything?
Sure, I can walk through this. Sure. I remember now, I was just in college at this time, but I remember when this was being considered and passed. At that time, the magistrate district judges, MDJ judges, is the proper way of addressing an MDJ judge, but they used to be called magistrate. They could be called district judges. They had different names that they were referred to, these local people administrating justice right there, at the citizen level. And so when the Constitution was written in 1968, the term judges probably wasn't applied to the justice of the peace or the magistrate or whatever. They were just viewed as a different type of judicial officer. Well, a lot has changed since 1968, and we now call MDJ judges judges. So that's the difference for the constitutional concept there. This is the source, though, of a lot of what you see in the Code of Judicial Conduct. And you see here that, okay, the first subpart A shall not engage in the practice of law, hold office in a political party or political organization, or hold an office or position of profit in the government, the Commonwealth, any municipal organization, except in the armed services. So right there, 17A just knocks out everything. By rule, the court has also said you cannot, except in small circumstances, you cannot be a member of a large, you can't work for a large corporation and be a judge. So here they're saying full-time to me means full-time. And you can't be holding a place in the legislature or the executive as well as being a judge. You've got to choose, and that's what you deal with. So that's under subpart A. There is then subpart B, which talks about engaging activities prohibited by law. Well, we sure hope judges don't engage in activities prohibited by law, but it's right there as a constitutional duty. And shall not violate any canon of legal or judicial ethics prescribed by the Supreme Court. Now, there we go. Supreme Court has all the authority on ethics. When you go into other states, it's the legislature that deals with ethics. So just, that ours is constitutionally mandated. Now, justices of the peace shall be governed by rules or canon which shall be prescribed by the Supreme Court. Ergo, since 1968, you had these parallel codes of conduct. And then we get subpart C, which basically says you're not going to be paid anything more than what your salary and expense reimbursement is provided for, meaning you can't get extra pay for this or some kind of bonus in the system. No, you all get whatever court you're on, you get the same amount. If you are the president judge or well, let's just say the president judge of any court, you get a little bit more, but it really, it's very equal payment. And then subpart D is basically says that no duty shall be imposed by law on the court or any justices thereof or the superior court, except such as are judicial. So basically, you won't have the legislature saying, and we want this court to do this, and we don't want, that kind of thing. So it is really the Supreme Court doing the decision making here.
So it's important, right, to know, as the judge said, that we have this code of judicial conduct, and this is what distinguishes judicial candidacy, I'll say, from political candidacy.
Yes.
That a candidate has to abide by the code of judicial conduct. Your Honor, do you want to explain a little bit about that?
Yes, there are just 4 canons, just 4 that apply to judges. And there are rules under each canon, but the 4 canons probably take that much text. And the way that I like to describe them is this. Canon 1, which we don't have up here, but which I will read to you because it is very, very simple, basically says this: a judge shall uphold and promote the independence, integrity, and impartiality of the judiciary, and shall avoid impropriety and the appearance of impropriety. That's it. That's how short these canons are. So I like to say, in order to share with people how I look at the canons. I look at canon 1 as aspirational, what the greatest judge in the world in Pennsylvania, how that judge should always operate: impartial, let's look at the words again: impartial, independent, and with integrity. Impartial, independent, and with integrity. Canon 2 deals with doing the work that you were elected to do. So it's about your judicial duties. So I call that the canon dealing with work. First canon deals with aspirational goals. Canon 2 with work. Canon 3, I like to say play. It's really what you do outside of work and what you can't do outside of work as a judge. And Canon 4 is the focus of tonight, which is on campaigning for elected position, what judges and candidates can and cannot do. So we have up here Canon 2, a judge shall perform the duties of judicial office, again, impartially, competently, diligently. And there are a number of rules that fall out of Canon 2, just basically saying, I think there are 16 rules that fall out of Canon 2 that talk about how you do your job as a judge. And it covers the landscape from always giving precedence to meaning putting first your job as a judge, get the job done. Don't permit public clamor. That's on Rule 2.4, but that's 1. 2, being impartial. 3, not having bias, prejudice, or countenancing harassment. 4, this becomes difficult for some judges because, the newspaper is always going to criticize a judge for a decision that is controversial. It's just kind of the lay of the land for a judge. When it's a hotly contested issue, somebody in the media isn't going to like your decision. And you can't be afraid when one is serving as a judge, afraid of criticism or public clamor, as they say here, to decide a certain way. And
I'm going to just interrupt you for 1 second. I guess, and the importance of this, for elections, right, is that judges can't defend themselves. So, you can have a reporter or a political party attacking a judge for an opinion that comes out, but the judge cannot defend him or herself. The words of the opinion speak for the judge. And that's really important. So, because maybe you would think, okay, so why doesn't this judge speak out? They can't. They're not permitted, under the code of conduct to defend themselves. Typically, or not typically, sometimes the bar associations will speak out and defend a judge who's being attacked. But, judges don't go around giving interviews about cases and decisions that, it is just not permitted.
That's right. It's very difficult too, because especially when you're running statewide, the big newspapers can pick it up too, and that they're read by a lot of people, and you're just limited. But as long as the public understands that we're limited, all judges are limited in what they can say, then the public can say, well, there's probably another side to this, and maybe I can go read the opinion. The other thing that often does happen is maybe members of the bar will stand up and say something. Maybe the bar association won't take a position, but members of the bar will. I think it's important because also, sometimes reporters want to push a candidate and say, so what's your position on X? Or, in questionnaires, and they shouldn't answer certain questions, particularly if those questions are going to come before the court. I want to just point out, for example, that recently, Wisconsin had a very highly contested Supreme Court election. It was for one seat. There was over $40 million spent in that campaign election, and the candidates came out and gave their position on abortion. And you will not see that here in Pennsylvania. I know that there have already been questions posed to certain candidates, and they will not
answer those questions. And that's why, because the code of conduct does not permit it.
That's not permitted, and there's a good reason. Because you never know what the state of the issue is that's coming up in front of you, what the relevant issue is, and to preserve the integrity of the system and to preserve your ability to make an unbiased or a decision based on what has been presented to you. These kind of rules really do help judges. So I know you have 2.10 up here, and a lot of these issues we address also in Canon 4, but these are judge-related canons. 1, 2, and 3 are judge-related canons. Canon 4 deals with the candidate. So if anybody in the audience wants to be a candidate, this is the canon you go to. Now, in some respects, the candidate also has to comply with some of the other canons. And I basically, when people ask me about running, I say, listen, pretend you are a judge and always operate within all 4 canons, as opposed to just thinking you're only limited by Canon 4. But Canon 4 is very detailed. It has an A, I think a B, but A is very, very detailed on what you do. And I think, well, I have the different numbers here. 4.1 is this one. This one is very general, and it addresses politics. It addresses the political side of things, political parties and all that. It addresses speeches, what you can say, what you can't do. It addresses money, how you raise your money, how you account for the money, and as a general precept. And then it also addresses the people. And it puts you in 4.1b says, all this stuff we're talking about is 4.A, we're also concerned about the people that support you. And therefore, it's very important that a judge or judicial candidate is to take reasonable measures to ensure other people don't undertake on behalf of the candidate or the judge activities prohibited by A. And I think a lot of times that is forgotten, that the candidate will comply with A and completely forget that they can't have somebody else be there doing what they cannot do. It has to, reasonable measures is really a term that means you've got to have some governance in your own campaign.
And Your Honor, I think you and I were talking ahead of time before this program, but these are pretty strict guidelines, right? A judge cannot go up and shake somebody's hand and say, will you contribute to my campaign?
Right.
It just cannot be. Now, that's why a judge should have a candidate, I'll say, should have a proper structure in place to fundraise for the candidate, because that person who the judge is shaking a hand with and asking for money could at some point in time be in front of that judge, and the judge shouldn't be informed, and shouldn't be informed and influenced by that.
Influence. Well, the money part is very much what can cause the problems for a candidate. Deborah is right. You can't ask for money. You can't touch money. You can't take cash, don't take checks, nothing like that. You should always be accompanied by somebody else if you are involved in in-person fundraising. But if you're going to an event and you might meet people who want to support you, you just give it to the person that's accompanying you, your fundraiser, and don't be a part of that, because it will be your integrity that will be challenged, your ability to fairly and impartially decide a case later. So when it comes to money, just move on. Even when I ran all those years ago, always had somebody with me, and always, if there was any inkling of money, I just turned. I just said, this is yours, whomever the person was, you take care of this. And again, never accept any money. But the other thing is the bookkeeping that you have. There are real definite campaign finance rules you've got to comply with to a T. And it's not uncommon to see an accountant be the, if it's not the chief financial officer of your campaign, it might be your campaign finance chair, but somebody who really knows numbers and can really manage money appropriately, write the reports that need to be filed regularly, do all the documentation that comes with anybody. I mean, it's just not getting cash. You have to have documentation as who that person is. Was that person a lawyer? Where's that person work? It's pretty complicated. So having an experienced person, very, very much educated on the financial part of a campaign is one that I strongly recommend.
And this is one of the factors, honestly, that you as a citizen should be evaluating when you're making a decision as to whom to vote for, because you know, you want to make sure that that judge understands the importance of complying with the code of conduct, with the governmental rules with respect to filings. You know, is this judge a financially fiscally responsible? Is this candidate financially fiscally responsible, even organized? I mean, these are all matters that you as a voter can take into consideration.
Yeah, and it actually makes your life a lot easier to have a campaign structure that is committed to this honesty and integrity in every part of the process, from the communications that come out of the campaign, making, you know, you're going to be responsible for the communication. So let's make sure you've got a system in place where you review it. Both of my campaigns, I had outside counsel. You know, that part of and it was a contribution made to the campaign, where outside counsel would review some of the communications to make sure that they were in compliance with the then current code. Now, this code is different than the code I worked under, because I was I think most of this came into, well, let's just say a lot of this stuff came in around 2014. But the point of it is, you know, think ahead how you want to organize yourselves, and then once you make a decision to run for office, get a lot of advice on how to do it the right way, and to have the experience at your fingertips to help you make decisions. Because if you are advised by counsel, for example, to do something or not to do something, well, then you have that as a very valid support of what you did, and you might avoid some judicial conduct issues. So very important to consider that.
And I'll follow up on that. There have been, you know, examples of candidates who are current judges who have used their own court staff or their own offices to fundraise for a re-election. That is not permitted. So it's, you know, there are specific rules that we want you to be familiar with as voters, so that you understand why candidates are operating this fashion, judges are operating this fashion. And if you think that candidate is not operating within these rules, then that's also a reason why you shouldn't be voting for that candidate. So it's very important.
And a couple judges have been caught doing that, and they, you know, in fairness to those judges, these are old cases. It was the way it was always done before. Truly, this, until, you know, people started to say, wait a minute, you're meeting fundraisers in your chambers. The chambers are 100% dedicated to the work of the citizens. And it just wasn't really thought through. But by now, anyone who is a candidate for, say, an MDJ judge wants to become a common pleas court judge, or a common pleas judge is running for an appellate court judge. No, you can't just have a system in place in your chambers that absolutely permits nobody associated with your campaign to come into your chambers, but also that you don't use chambers telephones or computers or anything that is associated with the work of a judge. You have just a separate physical site where all this happens.
So there's an interesting question, and I'm going to say I
Sure.
don't know the answer, but the question is, are the 4 candidates taken into account as part of the Bar Association's judicial candidate ratings? So I would say not directly, but implicitly, because the members of the Judicial Commission know, what the canons are, as well as the fact that if the canons are violated, there is a judicial conduct board that investigates. So and the Bar Association ratings do look at the judicial conduct board results or reported results. I mean, an initial investigation by the Judicial Conduct Board is confidential, but a finding it is public, and you also can look at the Judicial Conduct Board rating findings on the website.
Yeah, it's I think it, if you're really a good candidate for these positions, and most people are sincere in believing they are, and they are a good candidate, it is a disappointment when it's something that is pretty clear in the canons that wasn't there was non-compliance. That is harsh, but it is the reality. Again, judges should follow, quote, the law, and this is part of the law they have to follow when they are running for office.
And so it's interesting because somebody asked, how does a voter find the documents and campaign finance records, right? So there are, for all campaign candidates, there are state requirements as to filings. They have to be filed with the Department of State. So they should be filed in a timely fashion with the Department of State. They can be subsequently amended, but they should be filed in a timely fashion.
Right. And yes, you as a member of the public, you can have easy access to these reports. And there are some, especially for the more popular candidates, they're very long, and they go from big contributions down to $250 contributions. And when you're running statewide, you got to report all this stuff. And even smaller contributions have to be reported. I think I can't remember what the number is now, but the point is that these are great, valuable tools for you to evaluate the candidates.
Right.
So yeah, definitely that. And the other thing to evaluate that I don't think many people are aware of, but there are individual annual reports that judges must make, what they call financial disclosure documents annually, that are filed with the Department of State, about the judges and what their spouses are involved with, but also other sources of income or that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of information out there on judges and their service. Campaign committees. Do you want me to?
We didn't really talk about that. So we talked about it in terms of making sure that everything's financially sound, I will say. But it's interesting that this rule just says the judicial candidate may establish a campaign committee. It's not has to establish, but clearly it's something that I would suggest is a factor that you should take into consideration when you're evaluating a candidate.
Yeah, it is a may, because some judicial candidates self-finance. And, they'll file their own, or they'll have somebody file on their behalf, but they self-finance. They have their own sources of financial channels, and they will say they want to do that so that nobody is, no one can make the argument they're beholden to anybody. And it doesn't happen very often, particularly in statewide, but it can happen in the local counties. And it doesn't take a lot of money sometimes to get elected to a judgeship in a local county. So that's probably what that is about. But it's actually not a bad idea just to have another person with wisdom in the room, helping you make the decisions, but announcing the decisions, taking the burden off your shoulders. So I just think campaign committees are a very good idea, but it's not a mandated point. But they are subject to 4.4. And again, it's a specific committee, a specific provision about just that, committees. In fact, I just want to check to see how many rules are 4.4. I have my code here that is all yellowed. It just basically says this: A and B, a judicial candidate subject to public election shall take reasonable steps to cause the judge's campaign to do 3 things. And that is solicit campaign contributions only as permitted by law. And that means only for judicial campaign. So you can't merge an earlier non-judicial campaign committee into a judicial campaign committee. They have to be separate. These little things like that, many times people run for the judiciary and they've held a non-judicial position. And there are special rules that apply if you are now running for judge. So basically, the rules that applied when you were running for office or serving in an office non-judicial, such as, say, like a state senator or a state legislator, what you can do there, you can't necessarily do as a judge. And so it's really important to, again, get that advice. What are my danger areas here that I might just slip into my older way of doing things? And I want to make sure I don't do that for the judicial arena.
Okay, so
I wanted to mention real quickly the appointive offices, 4.3, I think it is, or 4.3 talks about appointments. And there are times when the governor makes appointments in statewide judicial vacancies, for statewide judicial vacancies. And the legislature also makes appointments to the county. These are appointments. Now, they are only last until the next election, but there are specific rules under Canon 4 about appointive offices. So if you're seeking an appointment and then you're going to run for election, be very careful. Well, let me say that. If you're seeking an appointment, there are specific canons that apply to that when it's for judicial office. And those are found in Canon 4.4 and some other rules, but particularly 4.4.
And so I also want to emphasize that these canons,
I made a mistake, 4.3.
These canons also apply for judges who are seeking retention election, right? So, it's not that they don't technically have to raise money, okay? But because the election is simply yes or no, retention election is, should I retain this judge or not? How do you find out about this judge to be retained? You can easily look up this judge's decisions, but the judge may have to raise funds for marketing purposes, for campaigning purposes, for people to know who this judge is, right? Not everybody knows who all of our judges are. So these canons also apply for the retention elections as well.
And very commonly, let's say in Allegheny County, typically the bar association, not the bar association, a group of the bar association, but also a group of lawyers will just set up a retention campaign for all the judges of a certain level. That can happen sometimes, not every time, but it can happen.
All right. So, just again, we're closing to the end. Put any questions that we haven't answered in the chat. But, these are factors that I would urge you to consider when evaluating a candidate, right? The person's legal experience, again, are they a newer lawyer or have they been in practice for years, and what type of practice, right? Have they been in state court? Have they been a trial lawyer, or have they just been, writing and researching? There are different types of legal practice, different types of lawyers. Did they get a law degree but not practice law? So these are things that should be taken into consideration. The individual's reputation for integrity and fairness, the individual's community involvement, their ongoing educational and professional activities, their compassion, their commitment to equal justice, to access to justice. These are a number of factors that you can, do your research on the internet and find out about.
And I'll just end with, unless there are questions, end with this. It is a great privilege to serve as a judge. Whether we're talking about an MDJ judge serving his or her little community, the Court of Common Pleas in the trial arena or in the appellate arena, it is just a great privilege. And it is about service to the citizens. So that's the kind of person that is best suited to be making the decisions that are aligned with the values of the local community and with what the law requires. So it takes courage to be a judge. It takes discipline. It takes integrity. And so it's all in the voters' hands who gets elected, because this is the beauty of the election system is anybody can maybe try to run for judge, assuming you meet minimum qualifications. You don't have to go through a committee that says, I don't want you. You can try to persuade the citizens that you're the right person for this particular job.
But as I say repeatedly, if we're going to elect judges, which we do, make sure that people go out to vote, right? You know, we should not be having 20% of our population make the decisions for all of us. It is truly important. So educate yourself. And again, I want to thank the League of Women Voters. I want to thank the judge. This was a great turnout on a beautiful day. So thank you. I'm putting up this QR code. So once again, we would very much appreciate you putting your phone up there, answering the survey so that we can continue our funding for PMC. And we're part of an Every Voice, Every Vote by LenFest to help educate voters about the election process. And I may have seen a chat right now. Hold on. Oh, it's a thank you. Okay, so Barbara, you want me to go back to slide 1? Oh, that's a challenge.
You had one that showed where to find information about candidates. That one, yes.
Okay, and we have everybody's email because you signed up, and we will make sure that you get a copy of these slides to help you when you go to the polls in May, or make sure that you fill out the form to get your ballot, your mail-in ballot. And May 1st is a deadline for registration, so please register. And thank you again, and have a good evening.
Thank you.